Alright, I'm here. First video of the series. I am Dr. Witt. I have been a psychologist for about 5 years now, and over my past 5 years of being a psychologist, I've noticed that there's an unusual amount of children that are just growing up to be horrible people. So, I thought, as my duty as a psychologist, and able to further my career, I thought it would be best to start to study these cases. Now, throughout college, many of my professors mentioned that in order to attack a case like this, something that would be best used would be the biopsychosocial approach. So, this is going to be my first time using it as a psychologist, so I'm going to attempt to use the biopsychosocial approach to decipher why so many children are growing up to be horrible people. So first up, we have Sarah Richardson. She is a 14-year-old student from Los Angeles, California. I got reports from her that Sarah is just really rude to all of her teachers. She doesn't do any of her work. She never turns in homework. She takes zeros on most of her big projects. She is failing all her tests, and she also has reports from her school that she constantly falls asleep in class. Now, I had a couple colleagues of mine go out there and discreetly examine Sarah with the permission of her parents, and it turns out that her parents are extremely neglectful of her, and she's very rude at home too, and it seems like just in general she's very angry all the time. So, with a lot of study, I found out that Sarah doesn't sleep very well at night. She constantly is waking up all the time, and that is something that we call sleep apnea. Now, in the biopsychosocial approach, that would obviously be the psychological approach, is that Sarah has sleep apnea. She does not sleep, she wakes up because she stops breathing in her sleep. Sleep apnea is when a patient does not sleep very well at night due to they constantly wake up because they stop breathing in their sleep, which would explain Sarah's very odd behavior of falling asleep all the time in classes because she does not sleep very well at home. Now, we're looking at it the social aspect. It kind of seems like her parents neglecting her have caused her to seek attention in other places where she can get it. So being rude to her teachers at school, not doing her work, it gets her attention, though it's not good attention, it's still attention that she's getting. And from the biological approach, it could be because of where she grows up. Sarah does not live in a very strong neighborhood in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles itself is a very big city with a lot of rude people, so Sarah could be gaining a lot of her behavior from noticing it around her in her neighborhood and in the place she lives. Most likely, I think the root of a majority of her problems would be her sleep apnea, while the biological and social approach do take a very strong influence on it. I think the sleep apnea is a main problem for her attitude issues and for her not doing her work and sleeping in class because she does not get the sleep she needs at night. The second subject in my studies, his name is Aiden Bleck. Aiden is a 17-year-old student from New York, New York. Aiden has an interesting situation. It is reported that he is constantly late for school almost every single day, and much like Sarah, he's very rude and has no respect for any of his teachers. It is uncommon to find a week where Aiden does not skip school. Also, I have reports from Aiden's neighbors that his parents are extreme drug addicts, and that their neighbor on one side of them is like a big-time drug dealer for their neighborhood because they live in a very rough part of New York. So I sent out my colleagues again, and psychologically we are looking at it that Aiden is addicted to heroin. Heroin is a depressant that will slow down his brain functions, causing him to have a lack of motivation, so not wanting to go to school, being snippy and rude with his teachers, being constantly late for school even when he does show up. And biologically looking at it, his parents are also addicted to heroin and most likely other drugs. So living in an environment like that will not be healthy for him. And also, it's unknown to me, but if his parents were addicted to heroin and other drugs before Aiden was born, Aiden could have been born addicted to heroin. So this child might just have been screwed by birth. It makes me upset to hear about children this age being addicted to heroin, but psychologically, I feel like that is his problem. Biologically, I do believe his parents. And socially, if he lives in such a rough part of New York, it's most likely socially acceptable for people his age to do things like that. And Aiden could be a part of a gang where things like that are almost encouraged instead of being frowned upon. So the root of all of Aiden's problems is obviously the addiction to heroin, but biologically and socially, there are just many things that are going wrong with Aiden. So that is why Aiden's been a part of this epidemic of children that are just absolutely horrible. The third and final student of my experiment, her name is Rain Lee. Rain is 18 years old, and she is a freshman in college in Wisconsin. She lives just outside of Stevens Point in a very small neighborhood, very secluded, a lot of trees, not a lot of sidewalks, not a lot of businesses, not a lot of places to go, just a lot of houses and close neighbors. And so Rain has been failing her gen ed classes, like absolutely failing them. Her teachers are very concerned. She has F's in English, math, science, and her foreign languages. But at the same time, she has over 100% in both her music and art classes. Now, I personally went to go do this one myself just because my office is based out of Chicago, so Stevens Point is relatively close. So I went to go examine this one myself, and it turns out Rain's parents are extremely poor, which is why they live in this secluded part of just outside of Stevens Point. And it turns out at the beginning, like before the semester started, at the beginning of the year, Rain got into a terrible car crash. She was walking across the street and this car came zipping around the corner. Because of all the trees, the car did not see Rain and the car just like hit Rain. She was fine, she can walk, everything is fine. She was extremely lucky, but it turns out that she had extreme damage to her left parental lobe. Being a psychology major, I know that the left parental lobe is very important when it comes to convergent thinking. Convergent thinking is your logical thinking, so math, working through situations logically, problem solving, whereas divergent thinking is more creativity. That would be like your fine arts, that would be anything building wise. A lot of people on Pinterest would be considered divergent thinkers. So psychologically looking at this, it is very obvious why she cannot concentrate very well in her gen ed classes, because her left parental lobe is damaged and permanently damaged, so her convergent thinking skills are extremely weak. Biologically looking at this, like I said, Rain's parents are very poor, so after the car crash, they did not have the correct money to fund the therapy to strengthen or fix her left parental lobe, so it is just permanently damaged. Thus, Rain will forever suffer from this convergent thinking problem. Hopefully it will get stronger, but as of now, that is why. And looking at it socially, she just doesn't come from a very wealthy neighborhood, very woodland, very foresty, so there's not very strong education systems in her neighborhood, so no one can really deal with what Rain is going through. There aren't very many people who can help her the way that she needs. And just the setup of how her neighborhood is how she got into that car crash. So, again, looking at it psychologically, I think the main problem is her damage to her left parental lobe, but biologically and socially it matches up with it too. Now, along with studying these troubled kids, I was hoping that there was something I could do possibly to stop the epidemic or make it better just for these 3 kids. So, while one of my colleagues was out and studying Aiden, her focus for psychology is operant conditioning. So she contacted me, and we talked about ways where maybe we could try applying operant conditioning to Aiden's case. We first wanted to try starting off with positive reinforcement. So anytime that Aiden would come to school, he would be given a reward. She would buy him lunch from his favorite places. She would bring him coffee. She would just provide him with things that he liked, and hoping that we could coax him into coming to school more. We also tried negative reinforcement. We tried taking away some of his projects with permission of his teacher. He had a big math project, and we told him that if he came to school for 2 weeks straight, that he would not have to do that math project, and it would be exempted from his grade. It wouldn't be counted for him or for against him. We also tried positive punishment. In positive punishment, what we did is every time he wouldn't come to school, he would be forced to serve detention after school the next time he came. And then we also tried negative punishment, where every time that he wouldn't come to school, the next day we would pull him out of his favorite class, art. He loved art, so we tried pulling him out of that. We found out that the one that worked the best was the positive reinforcement. By having him come to school and be rewarded for coming to school with coffee and food and different treats and praise, we found that he did come to school more often. That does not talk about the addiction. The addiction is its own thing that we have set Aiden up with certain counselors and certain therapists and psychologists for. But with his school issue, and hopefully with his issue about treating his teachers poorly, that the positive reinforcement will continue to help that. And we also hope that we can try to get DCFS involved with his parents and hopefully remove that situation, so biologically Aiden can live better, and then hopefully his addiction to heroin can stop, so psychologically he can live better. And we're hoping to put him in foster care so then he can socially be put in a better environment. So I will update you on how Aiden's progress is going in about a year when we figure it out. So for now, that's all I have. I'd like to thank anyone who watched this vlog, and I just want you to know that this epidemic of just horrible children, there's reasons behind it. So don't just go around and just ignore it. Like, look into it. Like, examine things, because I'm surprised with what I learned, and I think you'll be surprised with what you learned too. So thanks for watching.